Good morning.
Good morning. All right.
I'm sorry.
Thank you everyone for coming today. My name is Jacqueline Luna. I am the Adult Services Librarian here at the Coronado Public Library. We're thrilled to host David Rocco here for our pre-Veterans Day presentation. It really comes, the timing is perfect with Veterans Day being tomorrow, to give us a presentation on Dixie Kiefer. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you very much, Jack. Appreciate it. Hey, thank you for stopping by today and taking time out of your schedule. I think you'll enjoy this presentation. A little background about myself. I'm from the northern suburbs of New York City. I live about 30 miles north of the city itself in Westchester County. The next county up is what they call Putnam, and the county after that is Dutchess County. I've been involved in a lot of projects in that area. North of New York City along the Hudson River, they call that the Hudson Valley. So it goes from like Westchester County up to the state capital, it's called Albany, and it's broken down to three sections: the lower Hudson Valley, the middle, and the upper Hudson Valley. So one of the projects I worked on was to restore a fire tower, or an observation tower on top of Mount Beacon. We worked on that with a group of us as volunteers for about 5-6 years. And in the summer of 2013, at the dedication ceremony, somebody had mentioned to me that there had been a plane crash on Mount Beacon a number of years earlier. So they didn't know anything about it, so I went to the internet and discovered that there was a Navy legend by the name of Dixie Kiefer who lost his life on Mount Beacon with 5 other men. So I got in contact with other people. Thanks to the internet, you could do deep research, and I found out there had been a ceremony 5 years earlier to honor Dixie Kiefer and the other 5 gentlemen. I reached out to those people and they said, with the 70th anniversary coming up, maybe we could do something more. So once I started to do more research, found out there was another Navy plane crash 10 years earlier, where 2 guys were killed in a single engine biplane. They were in reserves. That took place September 14, 1935. Sadly, Dixie Kiefer's plane crash happened November 11, 1945. So without getting too far apart, just to finish the point, the group of us that got together, we raised money because we found pieces of the planes at each crash site. So we put historic markers at each crash site, so when hikers come up, they'll see, what's the purpose of that area. We have the flags there of the United States, the New York State flag, and the Navy flag at both sites. So Dixie Kiefer, this date here, at first I thought it was a mistake, but when Dixie Kiefer came back from the Pacific and recovered from some injuries, which I'll get into later, he was in an award ceremony in Rockefeller Center in April 1945, and Secretary of the Navy, James Forrestal, was reading off all of Dixie Kiefer's accomplishments, the fact that he survived World War I and World War II, 10 major injuries, and he turned around and said, "You're the indestructible man." So at that time, since the war was over, all these captains who deserved pay increases and rank promotions, there was no more need for admirals, so they came up with a title they haven't used in many years, Commodore. So that's how he got the title Commodore, and it was from May to obviously when he passed away in November of 45. I'm sure if he was only 49 at the time of his death. I'm sure if he lived a little bit longer with the Korean War, I'm sure they would have named him an admiral by then, provided that he stayed in the Navy, because he was a very brilliant man. He had masters in engineering at both Annapolis and MIT, and all the engineering companies are always looking to get him to work for them. So, all right, let's get close to this. As I mentioned, can you hear me from here?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. As I mentioned, this is the New York City area on the map right here. The Atlantic Ocean coming up into New York Harbor. Dixie Kiefer's plane on November 10th came down from Rhode Island and landed here in Essex County, New Jersey. The airport at that time was called Curtiss Wright Airport. Glenn Curtiss, the Wright brothers, were partners in the aviation factory in Paterson, New Jersey. That was a test airport, and Dixie Keefer had been there on a number of occasions when he wasn't on the boat. Now, as I mentioned before, 8 men died on Mount Beacon in 2 separate plane crashes. The single-engine biplane that took the lives of 2 men started here at Floyd Bennett Field, which is still there today, but it's a national park. And there's the Hudson River that comes up here, and Mount Beacon is right at the southwest corner of Dutchess County. Here's Westchester County. I live right there, the northern part, and there's Beacon. It's about 30 miles from my house. The crash in 1935 took the lives of 2 men. Lincoln Denton was 27, he was from Michigan, and machinist mate, second class, Clinton Hart, who was actually born maybe 5 miles from my house before his family moved to New York City. Again, these ages are sad, they were only 28, 27. Denton was a graduate of Harvard, he was a commercial artist. This is the replica of the plane that they flew on in 35. I went to an air show not far from my house called Rhinebeck, New York. They have an aerodrome and they put these fantastic shows on. And there's a sign right there that said Helldiver 29 to 41. So I said to the owner of the plane, would it be fair to say that a model in 1935 would be this type of model, just exactly except for some minor changes. So now I got to see exactly what the plane looked like. There's the tower for Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn, New York. This is the newspaper articles the following day from that crash. The local authorities seeked help from the Civilian Conservation Corps group that was nearby, and they were the ones that actually found it. And you can see all the young men that were here, and it's obviously their group leader. The sad thing about this photograph is the fact that the bodies are still in that plane. But being that these young guys were away from home, this was 35 during the Depression, I guess they were very proud of themselves that they can be very helpful in a situation like this. 4 out of the 8 men are interred at Arlington Cemetery. So we started off here with Lincoln Denton. I've been to 7 out of the 8 grave sites. There's 4 in Arlington, one's in Massachusetts, 1 in Connecticut, and 1 in New Jersey. And there's another one in North Carolina I haven't been to yet, but I'll get to that later as well, because there's a story behind that. This is Clinton Hart's headstone. He's in the older section of Arlington. The sad thing is, such as like Fort Rosecrans, they're having problems with these headstones being engulfed by trees. So they're trying to come up with a solution on how to figure out to keep both sides of the fence happy, the people who love the trees and the people who are respectful to the history of these memory of the men. So I'm keeping an eye on what they do with this, because obviously there's no family members around anymore, so nobody has in position to advocate for them. All right, this is I'm in a helicopter checking these photographs, looking south of the 2 peaks of Mount Beacon. That's the Hudson River there, comes down here, there, and it goes towards New York City here. This is the northwest slope of Mount Beacon, where the 45 crash took place, and this is the top of the ridge where the 35 crash took place. It's amazing that it was a mile apart from one another, separated by 10 years. Incredible odds. These are the pieces that are from the 1935 plane crash. It was just kind of surreal to find these pieces there still after all those years. So we kind of piled them together neatly, and we put them off to the side, and you'll see the marker that we put up, the historic marker. There you go. Of course, that's me here. This is the guy I became partners with in the project, Bill Stolpe. He's actually a dentist, Dr. Bill Stolpe. He was in the Navy, and it's John, got his last name at the moment. He was in the Marines, and they were very proud to be a part of this. And being the fact there was only 2 men, there's only such a need for such a size sign for that purpose. Again, as I mentioned, the United States, New York State, and the Navy flags. All right, now the 45 crash, November 11th, 1945. Commodore Dixie Keeper, he was only 49. Lloyd Heinzing, the pilot, was only 27. He was described as a Navy ace. You get that designation when you shoot down 5 or more combatant planes. He did 7. He himself was shot down but survives. And it's just so sad that they all survived the war and yet lose their lives in a peacetime routine plane crash. The co-pilot was Hans Kohler. He was actually born in Germany, came to America when he was 3 years old. He joined the Navy when he graduated high school in Garfield, New Jersey. After a while, he was just a gunner on the boat. He wanted to become a pilot. So he had what it took. They couldn't send him down to Pensacola, and then they sent him out here to North Island. And while he was the pilot, he actually sank 2 Japanese ships. So he was in line to get an award a couple weeks after he passed it. He lost his life. Dr. Zelinsky actually served in World War I as well in the Army, but he went back home, became a pharmacist, then became a doctor, the coroner for Essex County, Massachusetts. It's amazing because most of these guys served on Essex class aircraft carriers. Zelinsky was from Essex County. The plane where they landed was Essex County, New Jersey. So it's just constant connections. Aviation mate, 3rd class Clarence Cooper. He was African American. He was 22 at the time, which was unusual because of desegregation didn't take place until 48. And then last is David Wood, who was young at 23. He was only in the Navy for about a year. All right, Dixie Keeper got most of the headlines, as he probably deserved because of all the things that he was involved in. Besides being the first person to ever fly a plane to ship off, fly a plane off a ship at night, San Diego Bay, off the USS California battleship. Now there weren't aircraft carriers back then, so it had to be catapulted off the ships, fly around, land, and then come behind the raft, behind the battleship. And it's one thing if you're sitting there, but when you're out in the ocean, you have to get the power to get onto the raft and to cut the power off so it'll hit the back of the ship. And then a crane on the ship will pick the plane back up on the deck. So again, my goal was to always give recognition to the other 5 men because I Dixie Keeper got all the claim and the accolades. This was the type model plane that Dixie Keeper was on. It was a Beechcraft model transport, very small plane. It was a very popular plane at the time for short trips. During my discovery research, I met a guy who was researching on all the plane crashes that occurred in the United States during World War II. There were over 10,000 plane crashes in the United States, military plane crashes. So that means at least 10,000 people died that weren't even in battle. And you know there was more than one person on those planes. Now, after Dixie Keeper finished his service on the ships in the South Pacific, they named him commanding officer of Quonset Point Naval Station, Air Station in Rhode Island, which was a big base at the time. Now, what's important about Quonset Point is the fact, here's an aerial view of it. There's a connection to Mount Beacon and Quonset Point, because Mount Beacon got its name from the beacon fires that were set on top of Mount Beacon to warn George Washington during the Revolutionary War, who was across the river in Newburgh, New York, if the British were coming up the Hudson River. So at the time, they had these beacon fire setups along the river, so somebody saw something going on, they would light it up, and they'd pass it on up the river. So in regard to the connection, Quonset Point was the first Navy base that we had during the Revolutionary War. So it's very interesting. It was a very important base. It's still active for the State National, the Air National Guard in Rhode Island. I was actually there in summer of 2015 for their 25th annual air show. It was a remarkable day. You people live here, you get to see what's going on all the time. I mean, I can't stop going to the waterfront here to watch the jets and the ships. But that particular day, the day was capped off with the Navy Blue Angels, which was spectacular. So 9 hours just watching everything coming and going. It's a remarkable day for me. So that's the air traffic control tower at Quonset Point. If you noticed, all the old towers are all low, like 3 levels up. Now this is former Curtiss-Wright Airport in Caldwell, New Jersey. The same thing with the tower in the background there. It's now called Essex County Airport. Obviously this building goes back in the day. It's got that shape of a Quonset hut. Think about Quonset Point, Rhode Island. That's where they came up with the idea for Quonset huts. It was first designed there. So there's a lot of these interesting things that I picked up along the way. Here's the Patterson Curtiss-Wright Airport factory in Patterson, New Jersey. Still stands today. I believe it's empty. I will get out there to check it out. Now, Dixie Keeper and his 5 crewmates came down from Quonset Point on Saturday, November 10th, to go to Yankee Stadium to see a football game between Army and Notre Dame. Because at that time, the top 4 college teams were Army, Navy, Notre Dame, and Alabama. And, 2 weeks after this, it's the famous Army-Navy game. And I guess they just want to have fun, and they must have went out somewhere on Saturday night, and they met the following morning back at the airport in New Jersey. Just give you a view of what New York City used to look like. I'm not sure exactly what year it is, because to me, the fact that I can't see the Empire State Building here means it's probably somewhere in the early 20s. The Empire State Building was built in 1932. Matter of fact, I was just up on it about 2 weeks ago. It was my birthday treat to myself. Because there's a new high-rise building that was built right next to Grand Central Station called One Vanderbilt, and that's like 1,500 feet up. So I took photographs of the Empire State Building, and then went to that building, the Empire State Building, took photographs of that building. There seems to be like a war going on, competition in New York City with all these high-rises 1,000 feet higher. There's probably 15 of them now. And one particular stretch on a major street called 57th Street, they call that Billionaires Row. There's at least 6 of them there. So the following morning, after they met, they went out. They agreed to meet at the airport again. Same photograph, but just to give you an idea of why this is important. As you can see, they met during the 11th hour on the 11th day of the 11th month. And they actually was able to determine that they crashed 1,100 feet on top of Mount Beacon. Whereas in this day and age now with the cell phones and all the different apps, I had an altitude app on it, and I just was stunned to see. I remember the first moment it said 1103. There you go. All right, when they left the airport, they followed the Hudson River north, and they were going to pass by Stewart Newburgh Airport. At the time, it was just a private airport. Now, these days, it's an international airport. It's not as successful as they hoped it would be compared to Newark in New Jersey, LaGuardia, and JFK in New York. It's a big airport, but the air traffic controller gave the instructions to Lloyd Heinsohn at this point to send them over to the Hartford Air Traffic Control on their way back to Rhode Island. Now this is Mount Beacon in the background. This is the North Peak, that's the South Peak. This is the highest point of Mount Beacon, that's where the fire tower is. This is the ridge area, the face where 45 crashed, and that's where the 35 crashed. Now, this is 1,600, it's 1,550 feet high. So when they flew across, it was supposed to be 1,600 feet up. Oh no, I take that back, 3,000 feet up. The mountain itself is 1,500 feet up, and they crashed 1,100 feet. So they didn't have the, I guess, the instruments that they have today. It was also very cloudy, and that's the main reason for the second crash in 45. Somebody I met, and it's an older guy you can see later on. He told me that his brother saw the plane fly under the cloud cover, and it's described that as scud flying. So when the word got out that the plane didn't return to Rhode Island, the acting commanding officer sent down truckloads of Marines and sailors down to this area, and they walked out a trail to the crash site. Because nearby there was this Texaco factory, and at midnight shift was over, two young guys had heard about the plane crash. In fact, they still didn't discover the location of the crash site. So they ran up to the top of the mountain themselves, and they actually located it. One stayed with the crash site, the other one back home, back down to notify the authorities. So these guys came here the next day, whacked out the trail, which now continues on up here to the top of the ridge. And from this ridge here, you can go further southeast to the 35 crash site. So this is the debris field from the 45 crash site. These are the photographs the day after the plane crash. This is the Ranger that actually came from the fire tower project I was telling you about. And apparently, he took a piece of souvenir from the crash, which a lot of other people did too, both in the 35 and the 45. It's just, I mean, I could see 35 people were in depression, so whatever they get their hands on, maybe could help their family, whatever. They actually stole the machine gun from the plane in 35. So the authorities put out the word that if it's not turned within 24 hours, they were going to go door to door or whatever. Next thing you know, it shows up. But this gentleman here, Mr. Bell was his name, apparently he took one of the propellers and passed it on to the family, left it in their garage, because I was doing a PowerPoint presentation like this at the local Beacon Historical Society, and a guy walks in with the propeller. You'll see the photograph in a few minutes. It was, this was 3 days after I saw the pieces for the 35 crash for the first time. So now I get to see pieces of both of those planes. There's Dixie Keeper's cap right there. These poor guys had no idea what hit them. They were doing about 200 miles an hour, and just like in the cloud cover. Like I said, 4 out of the 8 were interred at Arlington. The Dixie Keeper, obviously this is between when he got injured in January of 45. I'll get to that later as well. So he still has his cast on. And he's on the hillside in Arlington, facing the Pentagon. The captain, the pilot of the crash of 45, Roy Heinzen, the Navy ace, he's actually not far from Dixie Keeper, down the hill. And Dr. Selinsky is buried up in Salem, Massachusetts, with his family. Side, you would never know if he was in the military or not. There's no indication of that. Hans Kohler is buried in Lafayette, New Jersey. His brother buried there with his wife. His brother actually served in the Army in the European theater. He was injured a few times, and that's Hans's footmark, grave mark. You see there. He was in lines for 4 medals. It's a shame he never got a chance to see that day happen. This is David Wood in Connecticut, and again, he dropped out of college to sign up with the Navy. Now, as I said, I was at 7 out of the 8 grave sites, and wasn't making plans anytime soon to go to Greensboro, North Carolina. So I was able to locate the cemetery where Clarence Hooper was because I was able to get records of all 8 men. The state U.S. Senator from my state, Joe Grant, was able to get the records for me from the Personnel Department, which is in St. Louis. And I found out the cemetery where Clarence Hooper was interred. And I called them up and I said, look, I'd like to get a photograph of his headstone from my records, if you would mind. I said, sure, give us a few days and we'll get back to you. About 3 days later, so I'm sorry, but he's buried in an unmarked grave. So I said, all right, let's work with the VA and let's get him a headstone. So it took about 6-7 months, but by last Memorial Day, which was the 75th anniversary, I had a headstone for him. So if anything in this whole project or journey, whatever you want to call it, this to me is probably the highlight of it. And not only that, after we did those hikes in 2015, you'll see a couple photographs coming up. I got an email from the a lady from Virginia, Newport News, Virginia, and she said, I think Clarence Hooper is my father. So what happened was Clarence Hooper, 11 days earlier, which was October 31st, just flew back to the base in Rhode Island because he went home to marry the woman who's the mother of a little girl that was born 13 months earlier, and that was the little girl. So she wrote back to me when I sent her copies of the personnel records. She says, I have absolutely no idea who my father was, so I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know more about him now than ever before. And sadly, she didn't have a photograph of her father. So it would have been nice to see what he looked like. So I'll keep working on that. This is part of the plane from 45. From what I understand from aviation experts, this is a bracket that supported the engine. The plane was probably, the wingspan maybe 200 feet, so you can see there's one on each side of the field. And in the middle, there's shredded pieces as well of the plane, and there's an area, you'll see it shortly, of what we call scorched earth. And 70, 80 years later, grass has never grown there again from the intensity of the fire. There's the other section. So there's 3 big pieces in the field right there. And this is the area I was telling you about, scorched earth, and this is all the shredded pieces. So every time, I guess, the seasonal change, the wind blows, pieces become more evident, they rise to the top, so we kind of pile them together. So there's the propeller that I was telling you about. It was really emotional, I would say, for me to see that. Because, you know, photographs are one thing, newspaper articles another thing, but to see this added to the pieces that were up on the field that I had just shown you, it was something special. Now, it takes about, from the bottom of the hill, it takes about 45 minutes. It's a strenuous hike, even though this is the pathway that the Marines had and the net sailors had, as they call it, bushwhacked their way up there. Obviously, it's been widened somewhat over the years, and there's the Hudson River in the background. So we're looking northwest. And at that time, I used to have the flags over the trailway, again, the United States, New York State, and the Navy flag. Since the time we installed the historic marker, we put it over there, the crest site field. So that's the sign that we put up. These are the 2 gentlemen you saw before, Bill and John, the Marine, the sailor, and it's my friend James from the Fire Tower Group. He actually had a Jeep to help us bring up all the concrete and the sign and the equipment. And it's 1,000 feet up, 1,100 feet up, we're not going to be able to carry all that stuff up. Actually, when we started to get the Jeep on the trail, it's really about as wide as the Jeep. A local homeowner came running out and yelled, stop, you can't bring the vehicle there. So I explained to him what we were about to do. He says, okay. Because there's a problem with Mount Beacon between people that hike up there, people with dirt bikes, people with motorcycles, and people with the Jeeps. And it's like a fight, like who belongs up there and who doesn't. So we're trying to work out like a solution that agrees for everybody. All right, when I first got there at the crash site, a friend of mine knew the location, so we walked over there. I would say since I found out about it the summer of 13, so the following year kept gnawing at me about to get more information about it. So the fall of 2014, he brought me up there, and when I saw all the pieces of the plane and this New York Times article on Monday, November 12th, I said a book has to be written about this, more stories have to be told about this. These were, in this case here, because I didn't know anything about the other two, these are 6 men that lost their lives serving our country, and for the most part, they were forgotten by some and unknown to most. So that was the article close up. Again, Dixie Keeper gets all of the notoriety, rightfully so. This is the middle of the debris field, looking west. That's the river again. It's amazing how close they came to this ridge. Again, they had no idea, being that it was in the deep, heavy fog clouds. All right. Now this is the hike we took up there in June of 2015. About 50, 60 people showed up, which was a nice turnout to say the least. And this fellow here, at the time, I'm looking at him, oh, maybe just showed up for a little speech in the parking lot, and maybe it was just, leave. He starts walking with us up the trail. I said, "You going to walk with us?" "Oh, yeah." I haven't been there in 70 years. What do you mean? So I was up there when I was 18 years old. So here he is, 88 years old, walking up to the crash site. And his brother is quoted in that New York Times article. Now, a year or two after this all started, I got an email from this gentleman. Said, "I want to give you Dixie Keeper's medals," because I was on my way to bring them down to Patriots Point, South Carolina, because that's where I have the Aircraft Carrier Museum, the Yorktown. Now, I'll get more into that as well, but that was the second Yorktown. The first Yorktown was the CV-5, that was the CV-10. So he said Dixie Keeper really didn't have a connection to the CV-10, more to the CV-5, which was lost in the Battle of Midway, which was the turning point of the war. Because Dixie Keeper was the executive officer on the Yorktown during the Battle of Coral Sea and Midway. He was actually the last person to jump off the Yorktown when it sank in Midway. So I said, so I called him up and said, "How'd you get these medals?" He says, "Well, after Dixie Keeper passed away, his sister and his mother moved down to Long Island where I live. And they lived across the street. They took a liking to my father, who was a pilot for the Army Air Force. And they always kidded that he looked like Dixie Keeper. So when they both passed away, they gave my father the medals. And my father passed away 10 years ago, and they should be sitting in the sock drawer like it was for all these years. So I'd like to give it to you because you seem to paying homage to everybody, and especially Dixie Keeper. I mean, it's something you can figure out a better place to put it. But it's been very difficult to find a place for it because, look, I've been to Annapolis, I've been to West Point, I've been to a lot of these bases, and a lot of people did a lot of remarkable things. And it's, I don't know where to put them. The Navy Command, the Heritage Museum, it's just, they have so much stuff, how much more can they take? So there's got to be Dixie Keeper family members around here. I know a bunch of them moved to California. So if anything, it belongs to them. I have it in a safety deposit box protected, and you'll see the photograph. I think it should be put in the right spot. That's a hat that we created just to kind of raise money for those historic markers. But as you can see here, that's the Navy Cross. There's a Purple Heart, you got 3 of them. But the Navy Cross is the highest award you can get in the Navy, with the exception of the Congressional Medal of Honor. And based on several of the situations that I read and researched, he should have got the Congressional Medal of Honor, but he went about doing things a little bit differently than most of the upper personnel did things. One of the things was when he became the first commanding officer of the USS Ticonderoga, he would always stay outside the captain's pilot house and be on what they call the bridge to run things, including in battles, which they always wanted him to run into the pilot house. And from what I understand, the executive officer would go to the other end of the ship, because I think they did have like a second setup to control the ship in case there was damage to the first one. And that's why he got injured. I'll get to that in a little bit. But these all remarkable medals. The way we exchanged his medals was that he was from Long Island. He said, I'll come out, I'll meet you in Dutchess County, we'll hike up to the crash site, and I'll give you the medals there. And he lays out his handkerchief, and this is literally at the crash site, almost like a ceremony. So I, in turn, made a photography box, and the photograph I had at Texarkana, and I laid it out like that. And it goes back to his graduation ring from Annapolis. He actually went to Annapolis in 1915 and was supposed to graduate the class in 1919, but because of World War I, they accelerated the class and sent him over to France in 1918. And his first assignment was the USS St. Louis. And there's his tie clips, that hanging from his cap, cufflinks. So it's just remarkable to see this. And again, it deserves to be someplace shown on a regular basis or in the possession of a family member. Now, the hike was in June of 2015, the initial hike to bring out the attention to everybody for the 70th anniversary. So the local municipality is called the Town of Fishkill in Dutchess County. Both plane crashes occurred in their municipality district. So they have this wonderful, beautiful memorial park for the local residents that had served in all the wars going back to World War I. So I say, look, we have some empty space on the wall, so maybe you could raise some money eventually and put a plaque up on the wall to honor all 8 men. Because that's not big in the background. Not everybody's going to climb up 1,100 feet, 1,500 feet up. So maybe this place has an alternative to honor their memories. All right, so that was the ceremony back in 2015. It was a nice turnout. Senator Joe O'Brien requested somebody from the Navy show up. This commanding officer of the Public Relations Office in New York City. That's actually my father there. My father served in the Navy in World War II. He was on LCS, landing craft support, number 88. There were 130 of them made for World War II. They were called the Mighty Midgets. These little boats, they're like the size of a tugboat in the Hudson River, maybe out here. They were only 25 feet wide, about 160, 170 feet long. I'm coming out here now on a regular basis. I have 2 grandchildren now. So last time I was here back in July, I did a side trip up to the San Francisco area. And I went up to Mare Island because I found out there is actually LCS 102 up there, which is the exact model. So I was able to get on a boat that's pretty much the same as my father's. I told the people that are the volunteers that my father was on the 88. And they said, come on, we'll take everywhere on the boat, including my father, who was one of the two radio men. And they brought me in the so-called Radio Shack room. And it was pretty cool to see that. They brought me downstairs to see where they all sleep and the kitchen area. And it was just very emotional. It was a really cool moment. So the 102 is a remarkable thing that is still around, but I'll save that for another time. So I was just so grateful to see that. And on May 11, 1945, when my father was on a ship, they were involved in what they call picket duty around Okinawa, the Battle of Okinawa. And an incoming kamikaze plane dropped a bomb, but because one of his fellow crewmates shot the wing off of the plane itself hit my father's ship. So we got hit with the bomb and the plane, and I have a crew of 7125 lost their lives, including the commanding officer. 11 died that day, and over the next few weeks, we had 14. So it was tough to see. One particular guy was a really close friend of my father's, and one other guy, he was from Brooklyn, the Red Hook section. Unfortunately, I'll get too graphic. There was just a piece left him on the boat. The rest of it was gone. So they threw whatever was left into the ocean. And because of the way the military works, since there was no body, they're listed as MIA. So, which is misleading to family members because there's a chance that maybe there's hope they can come back. So my father and his friend made an agreement to go back home when they had to leave, to go to the family in Brooklyn and tell the family, move on, he's not coming back, without being too graphic. The mother's always hope. He told his sister directly what happened and then left it up to her to figure out how to handle it. But it was the right thing to do. All right, so Dixie Keeper himself was born in Blackfoot, Idaho, which I stopped by about 3 years ago because my daughter lived in Salt Lake City. My son was in the Air Force. And I saw that Idaho was close by and Blackfoot was only 160 miles away. I said, let me take a ride up there and see what's going on up there. And I drove up, and it turns out it's the potato capital of the world. And then they have a little park in town, a veterans park. And I looked around, and there was not one mention of Dixie Keeper. Apparently, they didn't know anything about him. It turns out his family left Blackfoot when he was 6 years old. So he was born in 1894, so the family left in 1900, and they moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. So I went to the local library. I told them about who I was and who Dixie Keeper was. They asked me my information. And about 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from the county clerk, who was also the historian, wanted to know more about Dixie Keeper. I said, all right, look, we missed this year, but next year we're going to have a nameplate made up and we're going to honor him in the park. So this is the Patriots Field in Blackfoot, which is the capital or the county seat, what they call Bingham County. It's like a small little town in the old section, but then you get out towards the highway, which is 15. 15 is an incredible road. So I drove here last July from here straight up to see my daughter. It took me about 12 hours overnight. So it was just great. You got a great highway system out here, let me tell you. So came back the following year, and there you go. They honored Dixie Keeper for both of his contributions to World War I and World War II. Like I said, he moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. Obviously, worked his way up through high school. And I reached out to the high school and said, if you have any sort of recognition for Dixie Keeper as well. And they did. His name is on this plaque. That was actually his childhood home. I didn't ask for this. They sent this to me. So this is what it looks like recently. So it's actually in great shape. But his name is somewhere on here. They actually recognized him. So like I said, he graduated in 1915, went to the Naval Academy in 1915 through 1918. And there's the Naval Academy. I went down there a couple of years ago. It just happened to be lucky to be down there having their spring parade to watch 4,500 what do you call them, plebs? Plebs, okay, they come out, march, full dress uniforms. It was spectacular. So that was his graduation photograph in class of 18. When he came back from Europe, he knew that aviation and the aircraft carriers were the future for the Navy. So I went down to Pensacola to get his wings, and then eventually became an instructor. And then he came out here shortly after that. and he made history on November 11th, 1924. And bounced around different bases across the country, and he kept getting promotions. And at that point, he was no longer really flying that much. And then I just obviously had jumped too much here because I had left out a couple photographs. Prior to this, as mentioned before, he was actually in December of '41. He was the executive officer of USS Wright, which is kind of ironic again with the same name, because it was named after the Wright brothers. He was on his way back from, I think, Midway to Pearl Harbor when Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese in December of '41. And right then and there is when they put him on the Yorktown as the executive officer. And then he got injured when he jumped off the Yorktown and it sank. And during his recovery period, they put him in the documentary called The Fighting Lady. I guess it was a short they put in the movie theaters between the two main features. They would always have a newsreel type thing in between the movies. And the aircraft carrier they used in that movie, they named it The Fighting Lady, but eventually it became the CB-10 Yorktown. So he was connected to the second one as well, shortly, but he was still connected to it. And the other thing is the Yorktown, as in Patriots Point, the CB-10, is actually the Congressional Medal of Honor Hall of Fame. So it has multiple purposes. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's in the harbor directly across from Charleston and Fort Sumter where the Civil War started. And Charleston is such a beautiful little city. So after he bounced around different bases and assignments, as I told you, he was very smart, and the Navy had him as an inspector. Then they gave him his first command at the USS Ticonderoga. Took over in May of 1944. And it's when they were bringing out, it was built in Virginia, and after they did some test trials in the Atlantic Ocean, they went down to the Panama Canal and came up the west coast and came up to North Island here, and picked up planes and supplies to bring it out to Pearl Harbor. There's Dixie right over there. Again, like I said, he liked to be out there at all times to keep his eyes on things. He was quoted in a couple of articles I read, since I would never put anybody in situations that I would put myself into. And he was also famous for what they call cocktail hours, that when the pilots would come back from their assignments, for the ones who did come back from their assignments, he would give them some shots to drink and talk about, I guess, debrief them and bring them back down. I mean, it's dangerous work these people did. I met a couple of pilots that actually served on the Dixie Keeper at some reunions I was invited to, and it's just remarkable to meet these people. And anytime I talk to these people about the Dixie Keeper, tears would come down their faces. They love this guy. He never got married, but he always took his mother and his sister around whatever base he went to, and he referred to all the guys in his crew as Dixie's kids. And one guy called me up when he found out about the whole story. He said, look, my father still talks to this day about being on the chow line when Dixie Keeper came up to him and said, can I buy you an ice cream? And he's 98 years old and still talks about it. So the Ticonderoga was hit by two kamikaze planes within a span of 1 hour, about 7 months later. And the first one wasn't too bad, but the second one almost was a direct hit to the con tower, as they call it. Him being on the bridge, he got really hit hard, but he also jumped on top of a sailor to protect him as well, to save his life. He ended up having a shattered right arm and 65% shrapnel. But despite all that, he got himself up on the railing to make sure there was no more attacks, the fires were put out and all the injured personnel were taken care of before he finally went down but helped himself. That was 11 hours later. I mean, it's just legendary stuff. That's the damage to Ticonderoga. It's amazing, really amazing. Got to be frightening moments for people to be there and to be involved in this. But when you're hitting these battles, you're just doing your job if that's what they train you to do. As you can see, 143 men were killed, 200 were injured, including Dixie. Now, before I went down to one of the reunions that I was invited to, which was Tampa, I had never been on an aircraft carrier. I passed by the Intrepid for the last 30 years when I'm in New York City all the time. So I said, before I go down to Tampa, I'm going to go on the Intrepid to see what it feels like, especially to be up on the bridge here, to see what it felt like for Dixie Keeper. Nice and quiet, it's peaceful, it's not the same thing, but I still want to get the feel of it. The Intrepid, you can just go down below deck, one deck below. I've been on the Midway, of course, now the Hornet last a couple months ago. I couldn't get on the Yorktown when I was there because it was closed, but I'm going to go back. I'll probably go back next spring. And I was supposed to go to Texas to see my daughter and my other grandkids last summer, but I came down with pneumonia when I was here. And there's the Lexingtons in Texas. So there's 5 aircraft carrier museums across the country. There's actually, the JFK is in Philadelphia, which I saw about a month ago. Well, close to 2 months ago, I went to see a baseball game in Philadelphia, the New York Mets. But I found out there's 2 historical ships there, the JFK aircraft carrier and an ocean liner called the SS United States, which still holds the fastest cross-Atlantic speed record. And they're trying to raise money to fix that as well. And I think the Navy just made a decision to sell the JFK to a scrap company in Texas. They gave these 2 groups, actually 3 groups, about 10 years to try and get the money together to try and save it. It's not easy. I mean, but I was very impressed with the Hornet. I mean, you can go on multiple levels and right down to the bottom where the engine room was, and the tour on that was just how they take the seawater and convert it into drinking water and and the steam for the engines. It was just a remarkable tour. I go through the no. All right, this is the bridge I was telling you about. This is the Pollard House in the back over there. And I just wanted to see what it felt like looking down at it. So after Dixie Keeper was attended to the following morning, he was offloaded to a Navy ship, I think called the USS Samaritan. And you can see how all the guys were surrounding him. I mean, the real big picture of this photograph, there's a lot of people. They really adored him. And of course, I heard his speech, and it says that when I get ready, I'll be back and I'll meet you guys in Tokyo when it's all said and done. Okay, they were left in the law. Yeah, Samaritan. So there's James Forrest, though. And he's the one that gave Dixie Keeper the name, the Indestructible Man. Because like I said, at that ceremony in the spring of '45, Rockefeller Center, he was reading off all the accomplishments that Dixie Keeper had, including surviving World War I, World War II. And he turned around and said, "You're the Indestructible Man." And who would know, 7 months later, Dixie Keeper would get killed in a plane crash on Mount Beacon, which is Forrest's hometown. So after he recovered from the injuries, and I guess he was signing his friend's cast, who also was injured. And he got the assignment up at Quonset Point, Rhode Island. He wasn't a big guy. He was about 5'10". He had a bit of a weight problem according to the records I came across, but it was always, they were always able to get out of it. All right, so this is the reunion I went to for the USS Ticonderoga. There's an annual reunion they have. They didn't have them the last 2 years, obviously, because of the COVID situation. But this was Tampa, and these 4 men were there, and I believe all 4 of them are gone now. And there was a 5th one who insisted I go meet him at his house, and it was about 40 miles away, and they drove me out to meet him, who also served. They all served on the Dixie, on the Ticonderoga. Now, Walter is basically, and realized how close he was. He passed away a week later. Again, when I walked into their family house, on his dining room table, they had all these certificates and medals from FDR, from Truman, from Knox, from James Forrestal. It was just, and again, start to talk to him about Dixie Keeper, and again, tears be coming down his face. It's amazing how many people adore this guy. Now, this is one thing I regret. George Walsh was a fighter pilot. He was also a Navy ace. I don't know, he must have, about 40 missions, and he survived, obviously. And how it was, how I came involved with him, because of all the other volunteer work I did. We have like a network of connections with public relations, and I developed a contact with the Associated Press. So I reached out to my guys to promote the Mount Beacon 8 stuff that had just started, and the guy wrote back, "I'm sorry, I'm no longer in the Albany office, but George Walsh is going to take over," and I copied him on it. And obviously, I explained about Dixie Keeper and the body of the message. So about half hour later, George Walsh, he said, "I'm George Walsh Jr. My father served on the Dixie Keeper. There's a fire department for him on the Ticonderoga. Whatever you want to write about, send it to me and I'll get it out." I mean, it's crazy stuff. Now, he was in an independent living facility in Connecticut, and he had invited me over to meet with him and hang out and talk. If you go online, there are YouTube videos of him being interviewed by other people. Very sharp guy right to the end. And maybe about a year and a half ago, when the movie came out, Midway, I wanted to see how much they would dab into the Yorktown, which they really did. I came out and I said, I kept thinking about George Walsh. I said, let me find out his contact information. So I went online, and as I was scrolling, I came across his obituary. So I wrote to his son and I said, "Look, I'm really, really sorry. I never took your father up on his offer to have brunch at the facility. But I really thank you for putting me in touch with him." I talked to him on the phone a couple of times, so at least I had that connection. But that's obviously when people that age, you can't really take things for granted. All right, my co-author, with all the information I gathered, so many people encouraged me to write a book. I didn't feel comfortable with writing the book because that's not my true background. I'm sure I could have written the book. So I came across 2 books at a local food store called, I don't know if you have them out here, BJ's. They're bulk buying stores where they have like sections for different things, whether it's food, whether it's detergents, paper goods. But they had a little section of books, and 2 books said Undersea Warrior and the Ship That Wouldn't Die, and written by this guy Don Hughes. Says, for $10 each, I'll grab it. So I went to the office notes, and Don wrote about the fact that he has a website created 1 Million Untold Stories, and he encouraged people to write to him or to call him to share the stories of the individuals themselves, of their experiences of World War I. I mean, they're not around, but World War II, Korean War, the Vietnam War, and so on and so forth. And because once they're gone, they're gone. And by the way, there's a story idea you've never written about before.